Introduce Don B to you. She has been really fun to teach, right up in the front row, her and Trishelle. And even on the days when she's lost her brain cells, as she says, she's been really fun to teach. And I really enjoyed reading her thesis that deals with Korean culture and sort of understanding a little bit more about that. So, Don B, these are her words. First of all, I would like to thank God for guiding me through this entire thesis journey. I would also like to thank Mr. Wade and Ms. Maymay for their patience, concerns, and encouragements, and Mr. Moon for advising me throughout the completion of my thesis. Thanks to my family and friends for providing me with endless emotional support and for dealing with my late-night crash-outs. Lastly, I would like to thank Mr. Minnow and Ms. Yasmin for being my panelists. Please go easy on me. Those are her words. You don't have to take those words seriously. No, I'm just kidding. Her thesis title is Wake Me Up When Suneung Ends, Eliminating the Suneung Requirement. Give me a second to set up my timer, and I'll tell you when you can start. You can start when ready.
Straight A's, top rankings, and still a suicide note. Kwon was only 16 years old, yet he had already achieved what many would consider success. Ranked within the top 2% nationally and consistently first in his prestigious high school, he appeared to have fulfilled every expectation placed upon him. He had done everything the system required, studying relentlessly and endured his unyielding demands. And still, it wasn't enough. Imagine carrying this level of academic pressure at only 16 years old. Before his death, Kwon admitted that he could no longer endure this overwhelming academic pressure consuming his life. Beneath his achievements was a student quietly collapsing under exhaustion, fear of failure, and the crushing burden of expectations. Just a week after Kwon's death, another student in Thesis, known as Korea's leading education district, took his own life driven by the same overwhelming stress. South Korea's youth are being pushed to the brink by a system that demands perfection and defines their worth through a single, high-stakes examination. Korea's education obsession dates back to the Goryeo dynasty, where national universities called Kugjagam taught Confucian classics, which led the sons of high-ranked officials to pass the civil service examination successfully. This system continued until the Joseon era, where the Kwago exam functioned as the gateway to public officialdom, which was regarded as the only honorable way for noblemen to live. Kwago served as the main route to secure positions within the society, particularly in governments or militaries. However, this tradition was disrupted when Japan occupied Korea during 1910 until 1945 and suppressed the Korean education system. They radically modified the school curriculum with Korean language and history removed and the use of Korean prohibited. Thus, after gaining independence, Korea focused mainly in reviving their education, eventually introducing a nationwide college entrance exam in 1982. This system later further developed into Suneung, officially implemented in 1994. On the day of the exam, nationwide adjustments are made to accommodate test takers. Public offices open later, airplanes are halted during listening sections, and construction are suspended to minimize noise. Parents could be seen gathered outside testing centers, praying for their children. For Koreans, passing the Suneung is the first and last step in entering the workforce. Exam results not only determine which university students will go to, but also determine their future careers. This nationwide adjustment reflects how deeply the exam is rooted within the Korean society. Thus, if students perform poorly or could not attend the test, they need to wait an entire year to retake the test. The Suneung-centered structure of education has become a defining feature of South Korea's education system, with school curriculum centered toward the test. In this system, students' future opportunities are largely determined by their Suneung results, compelling many to study for their entire childhoods and teenage years, preparing for a single exam. Around 75% of elementary and high school students attend hagwons, which are for-profit private educational institutes that provide intense preparation for the exam. There are ongoing debates over maintaining the Suneung as South Korea's primary college entrance exam. Supporters argue it ensures fairness, meritocracy, and transparent admissions while reinforcing the country's global reputation for academic excellence. However, critics highlight its severe pressure on students while also widening inequality. They further argue that heavy focus on test preparation suppresses creativity, critical thinking, and emotional development, suggesting that a single high-stakes examination should not determine a student's life. Therefore, the Korean education system should eliminate the requirement of Suneung for 3 reasons. First, Suneung's excessive difficulty deepens educational inequality and harms the system. Second, it raises moral concerns for both students and families. And third, it restricts holistic learning while suppressing innovation. First, the Korean education system should eliminate the requirement of Suneung because its excessive difficulty deepens educational inequality and harms the system. Although Suneung originally functions to grade students based on effort rather than circumstance, students with greater access to educational resources consistently perform better. A test that started as a meritocratic exam has now evolved into an examination that depends on parents' resources and support. The Suneung questions are unnecessarily difficult and lack practical relevance. Critics argue that sections such as English exceed high school learning levels and fails to measure real-world language skills. This misalignment with realistic skills is reflected in score distributions, where over 3.11% of test takers achieved the highest English score, while 76.7% reported that Suneung was difficult across subjects. Furthermore, the Suneung preparation contributes heavily to academic pressure, with over 90% of Korean adolescents experiencing high levels of stress, creating an environment that prioritizes performance. Secondly, Suneung's excessive difficulty deepens educational inequality and social disparities. Because educational opportunities are closely tied to family income, many students feel compelled to rely on expensive hagwons that relies on Suneung preparation. As a result, students whose parents can afford private education gain advantages over those who cannot, reinforcing a cycle of inequality. In South Korea, education is tied not only to academic success, but also to social status, career prospects, and even personal relationships. Thus, Suneung has become a filter that separates the privileged from potential, as students who enter top universities often secure better educational opportunities and positions within the society. This cultural belief has contributed to education fever, where families heavily invest in private education for academic advantage and upward mobility. Finally, reliance on private education or hagwons is inevitable due to the design of the Suneung. The exam includes killer questions that go beyond the standard curriculum and requires advanced knowledge. Thus, hagwons become necessary as schools cannot provide the in-depth preparation for such difficult questions. Research indicated that students receiving private tutoring perform significantly better on assessments such as PISA, as it provides targeted instruction focused on examination strategies and advanced problem solving. Private education spending increased from 23.4 trillion won in 2021 to 27.1 trillion won in 2023, which is approximately 320.8 trillion Indonesian rupiah, with around 80% of students participating in private tutoring. Consequently, the South Korean educational system has turned into a marketplace where advantage is purchased rather than earned. Beyond academic achievement, the Suneung also raises moral concerns for both students and families. Education is not meant to focus solely on academic performance, but also on developing character, values, and relationships. However, when an entire system revolves around a single exam, the purpose of education gradually shifts from personal growth to performance. First of all, Suneung reinforces unhealthy competition among students. Although competition is believed to motivate academic achievement, it also shifts the meaning of success from learning and cooperation to defeating others. In South Korea, competition is normalized not only in education but also in social life, creating a culture of competitive individualism driven by the obsession by being the best and achieving higher status. Korean schools often portray academic competition as an inherent part of a student's education beginning from a very young age. In one of Seoul's wealthiest districts, children as young as 4 are expected to write 5-paragraph English essays within 15 minutes, while many preschoolers undergo level tests known as koshi for 4 and 7 years old. This competition intensifies throughout students' academic lives, especially in high school, where students compete for limited top grades and are constantly ranked based on academic performance. Consequently, these environments contribute to anxiety and depression while encouraging cramming and memorization. Over time, students sacrifice relationships, hobbies, rest to outperform their peers, while classrooms become battlefields where classmates are viewed as rivals rather than partners. Secondly, the intense focus on Suneung reshapes parenting practices, often prioritizing academic achievement over children's overall development. Korean parents heavily invest in private education and early academic preparation. In this highly competitive education system, many parents maintain high expectation and active involvement as academic success is viewed as essential for future advancement. However, this pressure often harms students psychologically, contributing to lower self esteem and reduced self worth among teenagers who feel unable to meet these expectations. This environment also encourages helicopter parenting, where parents closely control many aspects of their children's lives, even into adolescence and young adulthood. Although intended to support success, this excessive involvement creates intense stress, weakens students' independence and self regulation, and negatively affects their adjustment to adulthood and future college life. Finally, the Suneung centered education system severely harms students' mental and physical health. Suneung places tremendous pressure on students, leading to high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, limited rest, and normalized burnout. A 2024 government report found that 46.7% of South Korean high school students sleep less than 6 hours per night due to schoolwork, private tutoring, and after school studies, resulting in fatigue and impaired health. This extreme pressure also contributes to rising adolescent suicide rates, which increased from 5.5 per 100,000 in 2011 to 7.9% in 2023, while academic and college entrance stress identified as the leading cause of suicidal thoughts among students. An example can be seen as in the case of 3 high school students in Busan who died by suicide after experiencing intense academic pressure and future career anxiety. In 2023, 32.9% of adolescents experiencing suicidal thoughts identified school performances and Suneung stress as the primary cause, while life satisfaction and happiness rates remain consistently below the OECD average. In addition to the problems of inequality and moral harm, the Korean education system should also eliminate the Suneung because it restricts holistic learning and suppresses innovation. Education is not only to gain academic knowledge. It is intended to equip children to gain knowledge and skills necessary to become successful members of the society and to develop into capable and accomplished individuals. However, when people focus entirely on academic performance of a single standardized exams, schools and students are inclined to favor memorization and cramming over intellectual growth. This undermines students' ability to think innovatively and work effectively with others. First, the Suneung Center system prioritizes memorization over creativity and critical thinking. Because exams emphasize speed and accuracy under pressure, classrooms are pushed towards safe learning, repetitive drills, predictable question types, and memorizing large amount of content. According to education psychology researcher Ronald Begeto, when teachers are pressured to meet standards and administer frequent assessments, instruction narrows and students receive fewer opportunities for creative expression, especially when grades become the main definition of success. Education scholar John Michael McQuarrie similarly agrees that Korean education relies heavily on rote learning approaches, which limits the development and application of critical thinking abilities. This exam-oriented structure shapes not only classrooms but also students' approaches towards learning. Second, the Suneung-centered education system undermines collaboration and communication, which are essential for holistic learning and innovation. Although Korean students perform highly in core subjects, OECD PISA 2022 data shows weaker development in peer relationships and cooperative interactions, with Korean 15 years old ranked 36 out of 37 OECD countries in peer relationships. Research on the washback effect further shows that when exams prioritize memorization and correct answers, teaching shifts towards maximizing test performance at the expense for collaboration and discussion-based learning. As a result, educators adapt instruction toward the test rather than broader curricular goals. Finally, the Suneung reinforces passive learning and intellectual dependency. Because success is measured entirely through academic performance, students depend heavily on teachers, textbooks, and test preparation materials. This exam-oriented system creates teacher-centered classrooms where students absorb information rather than constructing knowledge. According to the OECD and PISA data, classrooms report significantly lower student participation with more instructional time spent on lecturing. The data also indicates that although students score highly in content knowledge, they rank lower in measures of student confidence in expressing opinions and engaging in discussions. Research published by the US Times further suggests that this classroom passivity is a learned behavior shaped by Korea's exam-based education system. Despite these concerns, supporters of the Suneung continue to defend its role in maintaining academic standards. It can be argued that Suneung pushes students toward higher academic achievement by motivating them to meet rigorous standards. However, the extreme difficulty and high stakes of the Suneung often narrow the curriculum and encourage memorization rather than meaningful learning. High-stakes testing environments frequently promote teaching to the test, where instruction focuses more on test-taking strategies than deep understanding of concepts. As a result, the rigor created by Suneung is often superficial because it rewards speed and accuracy rather than under pressure rather than intellectual exploration. Therefore, while standardized tests may encourage students to study harder, they ultimately undermine genuine learning by rewarding narrow preparation strategies. In addition, proponents also argue that standardized testing promotes fairness in university admissions because it provides a single standard for comparing students from different schools and educational backgrounds. Since schools follow different curricula and grading systems, a uniform examination can help universities evaluate applicants using the same measurement scale. Nevertheless, fairness cannot exist when students have unequal access to preparation resources. Studies by Fair Test found that standardized test scores often reflect family income and educational background as much as academic ability. Throughout this paper, I've discussed the reasons the Korean education system should eliminate the requirement of Suneung. First, its excessive difficulty creates educational inequality by favoring students who can afford expensive hagwons. Then we consider the moral concerns raised by Suneung, as extreme academic pressure negatively affects the mental health of students and families. Finally, we analyze the restriction of holistic learning while suppressing innovation. Let us revisit one story that I mentioned in the beginning. Despite his achievements, the overwhelming academic pressure led him to take his own life. As such cases occur every year, with the same reason, it reveals a serious flaw within the system that relies too heavily on a single examination. To solve these problems, Korea's government should reduce the influence of Suneung and create a more balanced admission system that considers multiple aspects of a student's potential. Such changes would help ensure that educational opportunities reflect students' abilities and efforts instead of their access to private resources. At the same time, society must also recognize that a child's worth should never be defined by academic performance. After all, true education builds people, not scores, and no exam result should ever be worth more than a student's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Danbi. Very good. Our panelists today are Ms. Yasmin and Mr. Minnow. Let's start with Ms. Yasmin first.
Thank you for the chance, Danbi, to hear your presentation. You have done a really great job. I'm really amazed with your research Actually, your work is totally well researched. I'm amazed with the amount of reference that you put here. So please educate me some more about this Suneung requirement. First thing I would like to ask then, from your proposal, it seems that the best way to improve Korean students' mental health is to eliminate the Suneung requirement. Correct me if I say I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you think that later on, if let's say there is a possibility for Suneung to be eliminated, how do you think that is going to improve student well-being, and then it actually can reduce inequality for the within the education system in Korea? Because the system is already there, and then to eliminate it later on, even though maybe you think that it will improve student well-being, it will cause kind of like a certain collapse too, because there is the Hakwon industries, and then the industry that built upon this test. Then, how do you think that it will improve student well-being? And the other one is how it will affect the industries related to this Suneung requirement. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. First of all, just for clarification, it's like my thesis is about not about abolishing the Suneung completely, but like reducing the dominance of Suneung. Yeah. And wait, sorry, what was your first question?
How do you think if let's say you remove the stronger influence of the Suneung requirement to access the top universities, right, in Korea? Yeah. How do you think that it will improve the students' well-being? Okay. And then the other one is how it will affect the Hakwon industry or the educational industry, because it was built upon this test. Thank you.
So for now, the Korean education system, it's all centered toward this Suneung for better work opportunities and better like relationships. And that's why the students, even from 3 and 4 years old students, they study for like really long hours, and they even undergo this test, right? This koshi for 4 and 7 years olds. And I feel like at some sense, these little kids, they need to also have some interaction with their families and also undergo their play stage. However, because they only focus on studying and it continues until their high school life, I feel that this system right now, it's harming the students' mental well-being. And by reducing the dominance, I feel that it could create like less pressured students in some sense. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. And how do you think, the second question is, how do you think that it will affect the Hakwon industries? If let's say
Yes.
the Suneung dominance is not that well established anymore.
Actually, I feel that because there are also teachers, they can move toward, because Korea divides the education into private and public education. And so these private education teachers, they can either go to, there's actually this government-based Hagwon, but it's all free and it's general. It's called EBS. And I feel like they can also apply there or towards to other schools, like other public schools.
I would like to ask another question. I cannot help to compare because in Korea you have Suneung, right?
Yeah.
And I assume maybe you know about Gaokao.
Yes.
Yeah, the Chinese one. Yeah, because both China and Korea, you have really, really rich historical past. And then in Gaokao, more or less, if I'm not mistaken, it's the tension is the same.
Yeah.
What if let's say you are in ministry education like currently? How do you think that how you're going to modify this test because you assume that it's not going to, well, I was wrong before to said that, oh, just eliminate it. You said that, no, I don't want to eliminate it. I want to reduce its dominance. Yeah, but I just knew that Suneung, actually it happens just within 1 day, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to do like 8 hours of test.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in Gaokao, you have to do it in 3 days.
Yeah.
And then the acceptance level in top university in China is 5%. But I just knew that actually in Korea it's only 2% if let's say you want to be accepted in top university. So if let's say if let's say in the future you work in education ministry in Korea, how you're going to modify it? So because you have the power, how you're going to modify it? So this well-established pillar of standard education will not have this strong influence towards Korea education system. It means within the family too, within the schools too. Thank you. That's my
Thank
last
you for your
question. Thank you so
question.
much.
I feel that we can distribute this dominance to other sectors, such as how we go to universities. So in Korea, the 12-year, if students study outside of Korea for 12 years, then they don't have to take the Suneung, but instead universities look at their GPAs, extracurriculars, and other external standardized tests such as SATs, APs, and IBs. So I feel like by also the same thing in Korean students that study in Korea, so they can distribute these Suneung dominance to other sectors as well, so that when they apply, they don't only look at this one Suneung test scores, but also look at diverse testing. Yeah.
Just one more personal question. You have done your research really well. You know a lot of things about the education system in Korea. I just want to ask the one personal thing. Will you do the Suneung test later on? Will you try it?
No,
Oh,
because
why? I just want to know. Thank you.
because thank you for your question. Because the Suneung test is, except for the other language test, it's all in Korean, and I don't think, because I've studied in Indonesia with English and Indonesian, I don't think I have the ability to study well, to pass the test. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ms. Yasmin. Mr. Minnow.
Danbi, halo, aduh, sorry, ini baru. Danbi, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, how are you?
Not good.
Yeah, I can sense the high cortisol level from your expression. Okay, Danbi, thank you for your presentations. Yeah, same with Miss Yasmin. I also didn't have any knowledge about Suneung, but because of your research, I have to research it as well. And yeah, your data is amazing. It's very complete. I think you really know what you are talking about. Based on your title alone, I think I only associate the Suneung test with the K-dramas that I have watched. Yeah, it's Sky Castle. Yeah, Sky Castle. Yeah, I can relate. That's my only source of knowledge before I researched Suneung. But thank you, yeah, for giving me a new insight of Korean educations. Okay, Danbi, my first questions is. Tadi you already clarify that you don't want to eliminate Suneung at all, right?
Yeah.
You just want to eliminate the dominance. But I think standardized tests exist because the government wants to introduce a fairer way to assess students, like to prevent corrupt, subjective, and nepotism assessment, right? So how can you assure that eliminating the dominance of the standardized test won't make a path of nepotism to come back and corruptions and etc.? Is it like eliminating the dominance of Suneung will create more chance for nepotism, bribery, corruptions to happen in your education system?
Thank you for your question. Yes, I'm aware of those problems, but what I'm trying to explain is that for Suneung, the preparation, even though it's a fair system,
Yeah.
the preparation materials, it's very different from, like, due to the prices, and more expensive hagwons can have more better educational support. And so I feel like by distributing, even though it can lead to those problems, but at least these underprivileged students, they can have a fairer system so that they can also, even though they cannot afford to prepare well in the Suneung, but they can also prepare for other extracurriculars and like interviews and other.
So, can I conclude that this practice happens in the preparations of the Suneung test, not the test itself, right? Or
What kind of?
like corruption, bribery can happen in the preparations, or is
No.
it no?
I was
No.
explaining about how it's how there's a difference, like disparity between the social classes.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I get it. So I think like the Sunang problems, yeah, the problems that you mentioned
Yeah.
is most likely happens in generations. Like this is like the cultural framework for
Yeah.
the Korean people to have a high education, high paying jobs, well practiced, a high social status, right? Danbi, don't you think that eliminating the influence of Sunangs only solve small sections of the problem? From my opinion, I think it doesn't touch the root cause of this problem, which is the cultural framework of Korean society. How do you? So the question is, how do you think eliminating the dominance of Sunangs can touch the root cause of this problem?
I think that because generations until now, they still have this perception that uh, you need to ace in the Suneung in order to get into top universities and gain secure better job opportunities. But I feel that by eliminating the dominance of Suneung, then the generations now and the future generations, they can kind of shift this perception so that even though they don't really take the Suneung, but they also can, however, they still can get into these universities also.
Okay. Thank you. Isn't that how many years will it take to change the perspective? Because because your
Yeah.
generation, Korean Gen Z, I think is more open compared to the older generation, right? Because I think Suneng is rooted because of generational belief, right? So realistically speaking, how many years will it take to change those perspective from the older generations? How to change the perspective of the older generation then, realistically speaking?
Actually, right now, it's actually already changing because the ministry announced that starting next year, they actually reduce the dominance and divide the university applications into two systems. So
I see. Okay.
I feel like it's already trying to shift.
Try to be implemented.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The system change. Will the mentality change? Do you think?
I feel like generations now, they're, as you said, they're more open-minded and they're like more free in a sense. So I feel like accepting the fact that it's also easier, kind of easier for them also. So I feel like accepting the easy way, gonna be, it's not gonna take long.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay then. In my research and my opinion also combined, I think this competitive, hyper competitive, you can say hyper competitive system, high pressure academic, yeah, and don't you think that this pressure is the thing that built South Korea, that was torn apart by wars to what is South Korea right now? Isn't that eliminating this, like you're risking softening the workforce? Don't you think? Or what do you think?
Yes, I'm aware. But yes, because of the Korean War and no, Japan's influence and Korean War, these people, they wanted to revive their education. So that's why they kind of built up people strive for towards higher education. But I feel that if this workforce and if this education harms the people itself, then I don't think there's the meaning, like any meaning for them to like continue it that way because it's harming the society itself.
So it's harming in a psychological way. You
Yeah.
try to find a more humane approach, right? because Indonesia already did the same kind of similar thing by erasing ujian nasional.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the result that we teachers get is like students lack of motivation. Hey, Mister, why do I have to do this? Ntar juga lulus kok, the school must graduate us. Don't you think it will create the same mentality for Korean people? Or do you have any cultural reason that no, it won't be the same, it will be different?
I feel that in the population-wise, Indonesia is really diverse in population, and Korea is very limited. Like it's very small. So
Yeah.
also, in Korea, they have this kind of mentality that like they still have this competition mind rooted. So even though they reduce the dominance of Suneung, they still strive like by themselves so that they can like reach a higher education level. So I don't think that actually matters.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I think my last one, Mr. Wait, I think my last questions probably. Uh, Talking about infrastructures, like the standardized test, the purpose of standardized tests in Indonesia is like to balance out and to find out the problems of the education level between students that is in cities and in urban areas, rural areas. Does South Korea has any urban areas like the village side? How does eliminating the Suneung test create a fair assessment between students in Seoul, which
Yeah,
is Seoul,
Yeah.
and compared to those urban areas? How does eliminating the dominance of Suneungs make a fair assessment between students in between those areas? Then how you facilitate a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Because Seoul and other cities is quite different, right?
Thank you for your question. What I've thought of is actually if so first it's about distributing the dominance. So they can go either by their school scores and other external tests. And the other solution is probably implementing the university-based tests
I see.
so that
Yeah.
the university themselves can what do you call it? Assess the students with
filter.
their own system.
One more, I'm sorry, Mr. One more. So, I just get it that you separate between Suneung and we call it in Indonesia as jalur mandiri, right? Yeah, jalur mandiri. But my last question is, jalur mandiri in Indonesia has its own problems because, the problem in jalur mandiri, they always use similar problems like nepotism, yeah? They use nepotism.
What's jalur mandiri?
It's like how do I say it in Korean terms? Okay, let me try to say it. Yeah, let me try to say it. It's like you're taking your own test from the university. So yeah. It doesn't take any standardized test. Yeah, that's the way. But when you use that way, the jalur mandiri test, usually nepotism always happens because some parents wants their students, wants their kids to have a better education.
Yeah.
Can eliminating because you said the minister of Korea also implemented that way, right?
Yeah.
How do you sure that this way will reduce the practice of nepotism, corruption, and we call it like the insiders practice?
I think that even though there might be like small percentages of this nepotism from happening, but it still creates better learning opportunities for students in rural areas. And I don't actually think completely eliminating nepotism is possible.
Yes. Okay, I see your arguments. You want a better mental health for the Korean youths. Yeah, Danbi, thank you so much. That's it from me.
I have just one question for you, Dunby. So some people might say that, so you talked about the problems with teaching to the test and that maybe education is not complete, but some people would point to Korea and say, but look how successful they've been, especially in the high-tech world, and look how qualified their students are to go all over the world and attend universities. Surely it's successful then. How would you respond to that?
Thank you for your question. Like what I mentioned previously, I think even though the students even though the Korean society, these people is well in those sides, but they're actually dying inside. And also by reducing the dominance of Suneung, I feel like it wouldn't actually let them to not care completely about their scores because of this competitive mindset.
Hey, good. Your time is up. Good job, Danby. All right. We'll meet friends and family, Danby, friends and family panelist advisor over here at the for photos.